It's April 3rd here in Seoul, and I'm Kim Da-mi. We begin with these stories making the headlines at this hour, starting with the ongoing medical standoff. President Yoon says he wants to sit down for talks with the junior doctors currently on a walkout from their posts. The doctors are yet to show any interest in Yoon's proposal. North Korea says that all of its missiles are now solid fuel and nuclear capable, as the regime on Wednesday claimed a success in launching a new intermediate range ballistic missile tipped with a hypersonic warhead. U.S. President Joe Biden stressed his country's pursuit of the complete denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula during phone talks with Chinese leader Xi Jinping. The two sides agreed on maintaining open communication, but also came across differences on economic and Taiwan issues. President Yoon has once again called on junior doctors to engage in constructive dialogue. And this time, he says, he's willing to have a direct conversation with them to hear what they have to say. South Korea's president's office said on Tuesday that although there are many medical associations in the country, President Yoon wishes to directly meet with the junior doctors. It added that the president's office is always open to the Korean citizens. Now, junior doctors are yet to respond to Yoon's proposal. And to cope with the doctors' absences at hospitals, the emergency medical system here in the country will run for one more month. Our Choi Soo-hyung has the latest.
The government will extend its emergency medical system for one more month to fill the gap in medical services created by the mass walkout by trainee doctors and by medical professors at general hospitals reducing their working hours. An additional 190 billion Korean, around $107 million will be spent on health insurance financing that is supporting the system. The government has also decided to provide an additional 150% as funding to hospitals running critical care and emergency room services. It is continuing to urge trainee doctors to end their collective action. On Tuesday, the Health Ministry called on them to engage in dialogue and suggest reasonable measures for cooperation.
If you stop collective actions and propose unified, rational solutions within the medical community based on science and logic, the government is open to discussions. Please deliver your messages with rational measures prioritizing patient safety.
However, despite continued urging from the government, the medical community has not responded so far. After President Yoon's medical reform speech on Monday, the Korean Medical Association stated that doctors' opinions had not been considered at all. The KMA added that doctors will not move unless the government changes its current plan to expand medical school admissions by 2,000. None of the interns newly accepted this year had registered by Tuesday, the deadline for the new employment registration. Medical professors at general hospitals reduced their working hours for a second day, but a significant reduction in medical services has yet to be seen. While there haven't been any significant changes after outpatient services and surgical procedures were reduced, eyes are now on whether they'll be reduced even further. Choi Soo-hyung, Arirang News.
North Korea has this morning claimed that it successfully test-fired a new type of solid-fuel intermediate-range ballistic missile carrying a hypersonic warhead. The North state-run media said Wednesday that its leader Kim Jong-un oversaw the first test launch of the Hwasong-60 missile the day before, and that it was aimed at verifying the reliability of the weapon system. It claimed that all of North Korea's missiles are now solid-fueled, nuclear-capable, and tipped with maneuverable warheads. This comes after the South Korean military said on Tuesday that it detected a ballistic missile fired from Pyongyang, which flew about 600 kilometers before falling into the East Sea. In the meantime, South Korea has imposed another round of sanctions against the North, targeting Russian vessels that are allegedly involved in the illicit weapons transfers to the regime. Our Pae Eun-ji has the details.
South Korea has newly added 2 Russian vessels to its sanctions list for their involvement in arms transfers by North Korea. Announcing this on Tuesday, the Foreign Ministry stressed that the government and the international community have continuously urged North Korea and Russia to halt such military cooperation. The Russian vessels, the Lady R and the Angara, were placed under sanctions for shipping a large number of containers filled with military supplies between Pyongyang and Moscow.
South Korea has announced sanctions as military cooperation between Russia and North Korea, including arms transfers, is a clear violation of UN Security Council resolutions. And these actions can be a serious threat to the Korean Peninsula, as well as global peace and security.
Tuesday's sanctions also included 2 Russian companies and the heads of both, accused of helping North Korea earn foreign currency by illegally sending its information technology workers overseas. The Russian firm Intellect LLC was put on the list for providing documents of identification needed for North Korean workers in Russia. The other company, Sojexvie, was sanctioned for illegally helping North Korean workers enter Russia and to stay there. Meanwhile, the U.S. also assessed Monday that Pyongyang continues to provide military support to Moscow amid the prolonged war in Ukraine. When asked if North Korea was still supplying Russia with weapons during a press briefing, Pentagon Deputy Spokesperson Sabrina Singh said the partnership between the two sides continues to flourish. She added that while Washington has released declassified information on North Korea-Russia military cooperation before, it will not reveal details of recent shipments. Arirang News.
Seoul's top envoy to Washington criticized Russia for its recent veto of a resolution to extend the mandate of a UN panel monitoring the enforcement of North Korean sanctions. Speaking at a press meeting on Tuesday, Ambassador Jo Hyun-dong expressed deep regret over the Russian veto in a UN Security Council vote last Thursday, emphasizing that the move tarnishes international trust in the Council. Jo further stressed that Russia's veto is an example of the close cooperation between Pyongyang and Moscow, adding that the move will have a negative impact not only on security on the Korean Peninsula, but also on the UN and the international non-proliferation regime. Now, the panel is set to expire on April 30th. U.S. President Joe Biden and Chinese President Xi Jinping have talked on the phone for the first time since their summit last November. Biden underlined Washington's enduring commitment to the complete denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. Our Lee Seung-jae has more.
Amid growing concerns over North Korea's continued missile and nuclear threats, U.S. President Joe Biden and his Chinese counterpart Xi Jinping held phone talks on Tuesday. According to the White House, Biden stressed Washington's enduring commitment to the complete denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula, adding that the talks between the two leaders were candid and constructive. The White House also said that Biden reiterated the U.S. stance of engaging in diplomacy with North Korea while taking further steps to deter further provocations by the regime. Tuesday's talks also came amid worries that Russia's veto of a UNSC resolution to extend the mandate of the expert panel overseeing the implementation of North Korean sanctions will lead to a potential erosion of the sanctions regime. The two leaders also discussed the ongoing issues regarding trade. Biden said the U.S. will prevent its advanced technology from being used to undermine America's national security, adding it will continue to limit China's access to key technology, such as advanced semiconductors, as part of its de-risking policy. The U.S. leader also raised issues over what the U.S. says is China's unfair trade policies and non-market economic practices. The Oval Office said that the two leaders also reviewed and encouraged progress from their summit in San Francisco earlier this year, including anti-drug cooperation, ongoing military-to-military communication, talks to address AI-related risks, and continuing efforts on climate change. Biden and Xi welcomed ongoing efforts to maintain open channels of communication as U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen and Secretary of State Antony Blinken are set to visit China within the next few days. This will also be followed by talks between the defense chiefs of the two countries, as well as a visit by high-ranking Chinese officials to the U.S. in the near future. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
NATO foreign affairs ministers are putting their heads together in Brussels this week. And South Korea is also taking part for the third straight year. For more, we're joined by VOA correspondent Chris Keskihel. Welcome.
Good to be with you.
The two-day meeting of NATO ministers of foreign affairs is taking place in Brussels from Wednesday. Chris, what are they up to?
Well, events in the Middle East are likely to take center stage at the NATO foreign ministers meeting. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is in Paris for talks with senior officials, including French President Emmanuel Macron. Blinken arrived hours after an Israeli airstrike in central Gaza late on Monday killed 7 aid workers with World Central Kitchen, which is a disaster relief group based in Washington. Earlier in the day, a suspected Israeli warplane bombed Iran's embassy in Syria. Iran said it killed 7 of its military advisors, including 3 senior commanders. Analysts say this marks a major escalation in Israel's war with its regional adversaries. Also on Monday, France proposed a draft UN Security Council resolution that seeks options for possible UN monitoring of a ceasefire in the Gaza Strip and proposals to help the Palestinian Authority assume responsibilities. Now, you might remember the United States last week abstained from a vote to allow the 15-member council to demand an immediate ceasefire for the Muslim fasting month of Ramadan, which ends next week. The NATO foreign ministers are meeting this week ahead of a meeting of NATO countries' world leaders in July here in Washington, D.C.
So a lot on the agenda. Now, it's not just the NATO foreign ministers. South Korea, like I mentioned, has been invited to the meeting for the third straight year again. Now, why is South Korea invited again? I mean, what does that mean for South Korea?
Well, it's all part of NATO's effort to deepen its collaboration with South Korea, Japan, Australia, and New Zealand. Now, the 4 Pacific region countries were previously invited to NATO summit meetings in 2022 and 23, and New Zealand's foreign minister, along with South Korea's foreign minister, will attend this week's meetings, but Japan's and Australia's will not. Korean Foreign Minister Cho is expected to discuss the current security situation in the Indo-Pacific region and express Seoul's commitment to strengthening cooperation with NATO, his office said. Separately, Cho will meet with NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg and hold bilateral talks with foreign ministers of other major countries. Now, at a meeting last year with South Korean President Yoon Stoltenberg commended South Korea for its support of Ukraine, saying that Russia's war in Ukraine shows how security is not regional but global. Seoul and NATO have been cooperating on issues such as cyber defense, counterterrorism, and arms control. And as you recall, South Korea opened a diplomatic mission to NATO in November 2022.
So it'll be almost inevitable for the foreign ministers to discuss the war over in Ukraine and also other emerging and new security challenges. Should we expect them to issue a collective voice here? I mean, what is the latest on U.S. aid to Ukraine as well?
Well, we can expect some sort of joint statement from this foreign ministers meeting, which is standard after these types of summits. Now, the U.S. Congress left Washington for a break without deciding on supplemental funding on a bill to arm Ukraine and other allies. Republicans who oppose the funding say Congress should spend its money on domestic concerns, while Ukraine blames ammunition shortages for contributing to recent territorial losses. Meanwhile, the Republican-led U.S. House of Representatives has failed to throw Kyiv a lifeline, refusing to bring a vote on a Senate-passed emergency spending bill with $60 billion to support Ukraine. The U.S. Army says it needs to produce 100,000 155mm rounds per month starting next year in 2025 to replenish the more than 2 million rounds the U.S. has sent to Ukraine and to keep giving Kyiv enough rounds to defend itself against Russia's aggression. The U.S. defense industry will not reach that goal, defense leaders say, without supplemental funding from Congress. So time is really of the essence here with the U.S. Congress to get something done for Ukraine in its war against Russia.
Definitely. Plus, apparent arms deals between North Korea and Russia will no doubt be part of the talks, right?
Yeah, given the presence of the 2 Pacific region countries' foreign ministers, that's a reasonable expectation. Meanwhile, U.S. intelligence officials told the Congress last month that North Korea has been granted some concessions by Russia in exchange for its support of its war in Ukraine. but warning that the impact still remains to be seen. But U.S. Director of National Intelligence Avril Haines added that while Russia, China, and Iran and North Korea are going closer, the prospects for a true alliance among those nations appear to be remote, at least in the intelligence view of U.S. officials.
Right, and on top of the NATO foreign ministers meeting, the NATO summit will take place in July, and that's ahead of the U.S. presidential election in November. Chris, before I let you go, where do the U.S. presidential candidates stand on NATO at the moment?
Well, NATO has grown since former President Donald Trump threatened to withdraw from the security alliance. Sweden and Finland joined the alliance over the last year, and its biggest expansion since the fall of the Soviet Union allowed Eastern Europeans to join NATO. U.S. President Joe Biden says standing up to Russian aggression together shows that NATO is working. Meanwhile, Trump, who is the presumptive Republican nominee for president, caused an uproar when he suggested in February on the campaign trail that Russia could do whatever the hell you want, his words, to the NATO countries he contends are failing to pay their fair share in security costs.
All right, thanks, Chris, for your report today. We appreciate it.
Good to be with you.
Here in South Korea, workplaces are undergoing changes as some call the trend office Big Bang era. Now, jumping on this trend, South Korea's Jeju Island recently introduced a new type of office culture. Our culture correspondent Song Yujin has this report.
It's a typical workday on Jeju Island. Inside the 7-story building in Jeju City, Kim Sung-uk is busy at work. Kim works for the Jeju provincial government, but today, instead of heading to the government complex, he's here at a second office. So this is a 소통 center or communication center in Jeju City. So here, people can read books and try out a wide range of cultural activities like carpentry and cooking, but for some, this is another office. Kim is among the more than 60 participants in the Jeju Special Self-Governing Province's Another Office project. In March, Jeju became the first local government in Korea to launch this initiative.
The office environment has a profound impact on human behavior, cognition, and psychology. Yet, the public sector tends to be rigid, making it challenging to foster cognitive flexibility and creativity. So we started exploring alternative office spaces outside.
Currently, there are 13 of these offices across the island, 8 in Jeju City and 5 in Seogwipo City. About 800 level 6 or below Jeju government employees are eligible to apply. They just have to select a date and location and sign up a week before. For them, it's an opportunity to enhance their work efficiency, which is why Kim Sung-uk has already used the program 3 times.
Tasks like documenting last year's work require my full attention. In the office, I sometimes spend the whole day on something that could be done in 1 or 2 hours. Especially when my boss calls, I help out colleagues or receive multiple phone calls. So I saw another office as the perfect solution for staying focused. Communicating with my colleagues is not a problem as I can do so via phone, video calls, and online messaging.
For the government, there is no financial burden as all of these offices are public or government-owned buildings. While Jeju is the only region that has adopted this system so far, this reflects a growing trend in Korea's workplace culture.
After COVID, many companies have adopted remote working or working outside traditional office settings. Local governments, particularly outside the major cities, see this trend as a way to attract talent and boost their economies.
Throughout the year, Jeju plans to open up more workspaces and expand participation so that more people can have their own another office. 송유진, 아리랑 뉴스, 제주.
Good morning. I'm Kim Si-young, and now we turn over to stories from around the world. UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres on Tuesday called an Israel Defense Forces attack that killed 7 aid workers the day before unconscionable and devastating, while world leaders have also asked Israel to explain its action. World Central Kitchen confirmed on Tuesday that 7 members of its team traveling in a deconflicted zone in Gaza in 2 armored cars with the WCK logo visible and an additional vehicle were killed. The IDF airstrike killed citizens from Australia, Poland, the United Kingdom, and a US-Canada dual citizen, as well as a Palestinian driver. Israel said it is investigating the incident, with PM Benjamin Netanyahu calling the airstrike a mistake. WCK immediately suspended operations at 68 community kitchens in Gaza. Israel has long denied accusations that it is hindering the distribution of aid in the region. At least 196 humanitarian workers have been killed in Gaza since Hamas attacked Israel on October 7th. Now to Senegal, where the country's 5th and youngest president was sworn in on Tuesday. 44-year-old newly elected leader Bassirou Diomaye Faye said he will answer to the results of the ballot box that express a profound desire for systematic change in Senegal. Faye defeated Amadou Ba, the candidate of outgoing President Macky Sall's ruling coalition, in the March 24th election. The former tax inspector, who was released from an 11-month prison term just before the presidential election, promised change in Senegal. He had been arrested and sentenced for social media posts critical of the previous administration. His campaign included pledges of anti-corruption and better management of the country's natural resources in the region of West Africa, with a history of political turbulence, including coups and attempted coups. In Turkey, at least 29 people have been killed in a fire that broke out at a nightclub in central Istanbul during daytime renovation work on Tuesday local time. Istanbul Governor Davut Gül said that the fire broke out just after midday, while the cause remains yet unclear. Firefighters and emergency workers surrounded the child entrance of the club to try and contain the fire, while 3 prosecutors investigating the blaze ordered 5 people to be detained. The newly re-elected mayor of Istanbul, Ekrem İmamoğlu, said later the same day that the club had not applied for the correct construction permit. The masquerade club was occupying 2 floors in the basement of a 16-story residential building in the city's central Gayrettepe district. One of the oldest books known to mankind, the Crosby Showen Codex, created around 250 to 350 AD, is expected to fetch over $2.6 million at a Christie's auction in London this June. One of the earliest known texts of 2 books of the Bible, the first epistle of Peter and the book of Jonah, consists of 104 pages and was written in Coptic on papyrus by one scribe over a period of 40 years at one of the very first Christian monasteries founded by Saint Pachomius in Upper Egypt. It was discovered in Egypt in the early 1950s and has had 2 owners, the University of Mississippi and the Norwegian manuscript collector, Dr. Martin Schoen.
Good morning. Spring rain has been soaking most of Korea today. Wet clouds will gradually spread to the rest of northern regions as the morning goes on. And mountainous regions could see up to 60 millimeters with a heavy rain advisory issued there. The capital area will see spotty rain through mid-afternoon. Rain clouds will let up from the north, so those in Jeju and Jeollanam-do should brace for heavy rain through tonight. Rain brings down the highs in southern parts of Korea. Temperatures go down nearly 10 degrees lower in some of southern regions. That's including over in Daegu. Meanwhile, Busan gets up to 16 degrees Celsius, Seoul topping out at 20 degrees with a dry advisory in place in the capital. But today's rain should help to ease the dryness. Humidity yesterday was as low as just 18%, while the ideal humidity level around this time should be around 50%. Fine spring weather returns tomorrow, with temperatures staying above normal for the next 5 days. That's Korea for you, and here's a look at the international weather conditions.
We thank you for watching New Day at Arirang. We'll be back tomorrow for Thursday's edition at the same time, 9 a.m. Korea time.